The Hat is back. Ha ha! What up, random rockers? Alright. So, Joker. Speaking of Batman related stuff and all that. Anyway. I don't have a Joker shirt, so I have to sit up for a Batman. Alright. Anyways. This is, right now we're in non-spoiler territory. So, this film stars Joaquin Phoenix as as a man named Arthur Fleck, who's basically just a man who's been dealing with his own form of mental illness and dealing with all the trials and tribulations that comes from a dark, grimy city that is like Gotham City, and just the spiral and unraveling of what is of this man until he becomes that. And most of this film is very Martin Scorsese-esque, and in fact takes a lot, the way that it is handled, takes a lot from two of those films, both having starred Robert De Niro, who ironically also is in this as a very important character, side character in the film that plays a big part in the film, aside from the likes of I can't remember who the actor is that plays him, but aside from the three other things, for the most part, this is kind of meant to be its own contained film. But what makes it kind of fit into the whole Batman universe is possibly in a more elseworldy kind of way, is more of the fact of his character becoming that of the Joker, Gotham City itself, and, the Wayne family, more so Thomas Wayne specifically, in terms of involvement. And other than that, it's kind of its own thing, where it's essentially a combination of Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. Or at least that's what I have been told. I know of Taxi Driver. I knew, and up to the point of the way these trailers were, and from other people's comparisons, I wouldn't have even known about King of Comedy. But now I'm sort of interested in seeing how this is, and everyone is, and I will tell you that, or at least the overhype of the controversy this film gets is bull. It's not all that. It's not nearly to the extent of something like a Quentin Tarantino movie or some other films. Yeah, heck, the last few minutes of Rambo: Last Blood were considerably more violent than, or even that scene, or even that particular bone break scene in the movie. That's already pretty much makes you. Is it pretty clear the kind of gore and violence that film's going to eventually give you by the end of that film is far more violent than this. You do get some moments, but it's more something that anyone who hasn't seen Game of Thrones or Breaking Bad wouldn't already be used to at this point. And I mean, it's rated R, so in that regard, what do you expect in those scenes? And it's just kind of disturbing, somewhat bleak, but there are far worse and far more bleak things in terms of film lately. But it does, for the most part, deal with for the most part, the film itself, in terms of just dealing with just the whole awareness of mental illness in and of itself, and also just in its own messed up way, even though you could probably get a better idea of that through a Bill and Ted movie, and that's pretty much be excellent to each other. Because I will eventually get to that more so when it comes to the spoilers of this. And yes, Joaquin Phoenix's performance is great. I can't say that there's enough lines in the movie that I can take with me in the ways that you got more out of Heath Ledger's Joker, more so or less. Though I will say, I think what people wanted out of Joker for Jared Leto and didn't get, maybe they will get out of this for sure. Even though I didn't mind his Joker, but I do understand some form of the complaints with it. And yeah, the way he went about it, leading into it, was messed up. It was kind of messed up and just didn't And it might have hurt Jared Leto's career if the recent 30 Seconds to Mars record didn't. Yeah, from last year at least. Ugh. Oof. Oof. Well, anyway. Oh boy. So, but anyways, and it's even more interesting given, Joaquin Phoenix and Heath were pretty close, and, his death sucked even more. So he knew the toll that took, and to the point of what happened to Heath because of it. And that's what made it, and his performance was that good, and still is considered that good for what that film had to offer. And this, in terms of the closest thing to what the Joker is, in that, at least that darker side of it. And this film explores that even more. And for the most part, this is a drama that has like maybe some tinges of dark comedy in it, I guess you could say, and some moments do hit in a way that's kind of actually isn't almost intentionally funny in its own way. But, it could come off jarring for like serious moments. And it's just him just slowly unraveling and stuff. And there are certain things that are kind of spoilers, but into the terms of the film itself. And for the most part, and then you have Zazie Beetz, which is, she's kind of more of, she's performs well for what she's given, and what she's given is basically just as being a plot device. And I wouldn't even remember what her character's name is, but you don't really get one, to be honest, and we'll get to that later too, for why. And then, but for the most part, what we get is interesting, and just how things are handled with it, and some things, if not for certain other spoilers that have been released for this thing, I wouldn't have even thought about it then either, in terms of discussion. But for the most part, you kind of have to look back and refer. For the most part, it is still it's a Joker movie, but it can, while simultaneously, it's not. So in its own right, this thing is more a film than a DC movie. Well, it's definitely not DC Extended Universe or whatever we're calling, or DCU or whatever we're calling that at this point, which we'll be eventually getting to that with the way they're handling the Birds of Prey thing. It has me a little worried, to be honest, though they're putting it in February, so it's, whatever at that point. But anyways, overall, I can't lie and say I didn't enjoy this film. And if anything, I'm almost somewhat, if ever given the chance for some reason to actually sit down and watch Taxi Driver all the way through, or King of Comedy, if I ever, or give those films a chance, this film kind of makes me curious about how those films are and how they would tie in to each other, because I don't know on that entirely just yet. Yeah, but I'm told that those were the basis of this, and they took very heavy-handed and whatnot. And a lot of the criticisms of this film, or at least the whole offensive thing, I think that's just really woke culture, and cancel culture just needs to stop. But in a weird way, because of the way the DCEU has, and DC and Warner Brothers have been handling things, the fact that it led to this film happening, a film that is definitely, once again, another notch on the belt of the many great performances in Joaquin Phoenix's career, and more so, even bigger thing, whoever is does the cinematography and all this, and the way it's been directed and handled by Todd Phillips, of all things, has come a long way from having done films like Hangover and, I believe, War Dogs? I believe is the name of the film. I could be wrong, but whatever the film was that had Jonah Hill and Miles Teller. Which was kind of that moment where it was going to lead into this moment, and he's even afraid to do normal comedies now, or at least a straight-up comedy at the very least, because of the way times have become. And this film, if it is somewhat funny, it's more of a dark comedy. And some, I don't know if I would say Death to Smoochie. I've yet to see that film, but from what I've heard in terms of vibes, I'm kind of getting a little bit of that too. But more so, like I said, and some other films with that. But more so what I've been hearing from the Martin Scorsese feel of this, in terms of the direction Todd Phillips wanted to go. In fact, from what I hear, Martin Scorsese kind of executive produced this. So I guess his stamp is definitely very much there, and Todd Phillips wanted to go that route, and having his input probably was helpful. And overall, it'd be stupid for me. I mean, is it? Yeah, but to say this film isn't worth your time to see in a theater at all, at least, worthwhile enough to say it's at least possibly I'd say it's worthy enough to be full price, or whether matinee or full price, doesn't matter. This film does rock, and it deserves to be, talked about. Joaquin Phoenix deserves an Oscar. Todd Phillips probably to some degree deserves a nomination. At least Phillips deserves a nomination for direction. And whoever did the cinematography definitely, for sure, deserves a nomination, if not winning it. I wouldn't even mind Joaquin Phoenix actually winning the role. I hope nothing bad happens to him like what happened with Heath after the performance he did here. I mean, because I understand him not coming back to it, and the way things were handled with him and stuff is... But anyway, and now this is the point where I need to kind of get into some spoilers here and there, and you've been warned in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and here we go. So, this film kind of, you could tell from the opening scene where this starts, which they kind of showed he's kind of doing his one job as like a clown performer thing, or at least he's kind of like holding up signs or something, like for a one music store for Everything Goes or something. And that's another thing. I mean, the way this is interpreted, and the way most people say that when it comes to the Joker himself, he's his own unreliable narrator in terms of his own origin. But for what this interpretation does for this film, it's probably the best form of an origin story you're going to get for the Joker, especially is possibly the best form of a story put together. Even if it seems messy, it's kind of because for the Joker, that's kind of the point. Or at least for that character, and he's because Joker himself's an unreliable narrator, and was following this Arthur Fleck guy. He's kind of doing his makeup thing, wearing his clown stuff, and he's trying to smile, and you could kind of see, you could tell even just looking in his eyes how disturbed he is, how messed up he is. He's trying to go to his therapist, and his therapist ain't much of shit. Clearly, and he's being cut off, and just the way things are going with this whole thing. And then there's some certain twists that happen in the movie that even makes you go, what? But it keeps, this film still finds a way to keep you engaged. And there are some people who just aren't going to get it because they just can't bother to wrap their head around it, or they expect some kind of action thing. It's like there's nothing of that nature necessarily. This is kind of just that film buffs type of movie that also has while simultaneously have an appreciation for the character, for that character and the kind of villain that he is, the Joker himself, and an understanding of some form of understanding, or what he wants, the character wants you to be able to understand, to get inside his mind, or at least that's you're willing to deal with. The way things have been done in terms of his interpretations, and even they kind of do reveal a lot in the trailers in terms of beats, but it still works, and some reveals start to make sense. I mean, especially when it comes to the girl that Leslie Beats meets the mother, but you don't see the kid as much, which also adds to weirdness. And the way he does things, you don't really want to root for him in those regards, but you kind of, you're not. It can be kind of disturbing a little bit, but it's also the fact you got to understand where even if you do know of it as a Joker origin story or something, don't even go in expecting this to be what it is. More than that, just expect an experience. Whether or not that experience is going to leave a sour pit in your stomach or not, as which is probably what will happen, especially the way they choose to end this thing. It was brilliant as well. Even everything itself has built up, even to the point of how they handle things with the essentially what we've known of the origin story, and how but more so giving Thomas Wayne's death more of a meaning. Though some things they didn't have to do, like the pearls or whatever, which I didn't bother me all that much, but I still think it worked, and how they handled that, and it was just, and some things they could have just not shown, but you kind of have the idea of it just before the actual act itself happens, and you kind of get this idea of just what his character is like, and of just how he is with his relationship with his mother. You see all these certain moments where you kind of are like, wait, is this you gotta know what is real and what is the truth, and even that he is somewhat of an unreliable narrator, but what you do get does have some form of a through line, and the moments that you feel like, wait, there's something right, they do kind of clarify in a way that makes sense. Like with her character, it turns out the whole time was not really her, just this fantasy in his head, and certain aspects of the talk show host moments, those were kind of fantasies in his head as well, especially the ones you get in the beginning, and this is a disturbed man, and he's taking care of his somewhat sick mother, and it's also fun in unraveling and finding out that what's the interpretation, is his mother telling him, of itself, is his mother telling him the truth about what happens, and just the full unraveling, slow but sure unraveling that he goes through, that brings him to that point of insanity of becoming that and embodying what is the Joker. It's himself in that disturbing essence of comedy, and that disturbing essence. And there are moments where things do kind of become funny, and like during his interrogation at the outside the hospital, and when he's done dealing with them, which was a serious moment, and then all of a sudden he fucking just hits them. The way he handles himself with the gun, which is kind of disturbing, and the way he handles it is sort of. There are moments where you do kind of laugh a little bit and get some. Like that moment there, and you understand, he gets beat up by a bunch of kids and loses his sign, but we don't see what happened with the sign, because they say certain things, and he loses his job over this. He loses his ability to take care. He loses all the chance to be able to utilize his medications or anything to help keep him sane, and it gets to a point, and somehow you don't know if maybe he did get the gun from one of the guys that was his co-worker or something, or if maybe he did go out and buy a gun and wasn't for sure that it was, but from what we've seen, that it's what it is. And some of it's all just kind of up in the air technically, and there's other films that do that. I mean, Fight Club's known for it. There's more disturbing. Hell, Seven's a more disturbing film. And a lot of Gone Girl are more disturbing films than this, but it still works. And the way the biggest twist of it all is the whole fact that possibility that or at least through his own mother's perspective, and just the fact that his mom, finding out through these letters and stuff that his mom's been sending, is that the possibility he could be the illegitimate son of Thomas Wayne, and that's why she's so thinking that she'll help them because of that. And they just make it out to where it seems like she's just insane. But you also leave up this interpretation from that, with how bleak and dark Gotham is, and how Thomas Wayne says he's the kind of guy that wants to help and all this stuff, but you could still kind of see he comes off like he's kind of a pompous ass. But the only good thing you do get out of him is how he feels about the current wife and his kid with Bruce, with Martha and Bruce, at the very least, being the kind of things that he cares about. at least that you do get, and a brief. I'm guessing Alfred's the butler in this case, and then just how they handle that dynamic is, and him and his mother, and then him trying to figure out the truth, and then to the point of going to the Arkham Asylum or whatever, just to kind of, just to figure out everything, and when he figures it out, and you don't know whether or not that's her making up a signature or whatnot, or if it's really him, you know, was he really considerably abused, but then they've come to find out through those papers and whatnot, that she was possibly just abused from a head trauma and was just found chained to a heater or something, and just the possibility that she was just that nuts, or it was a possibility that he was trying to clean up Thomas Wayne just pulled some strings because he had that kind of power. You never really know for sure with that. I mean, as far as you know, what you do get, you can kind of be able to go off of and just somewhat rely on what you know from Batman's lore, I guess, to go off of this. And just knowing that kind of he's an unreliable narrator, but you can kind of see where, in his messed up mindset, where he's kind of coming from. And, he got his ass beat by these guys, and those first two was self-defense, but then after that, and that moment where it kind of leads to this idea of potentially his unraveling, fully coming to that point, and then all the people saying that, blaming him for all that. Yet no one really talks about the woman that was there, that was kind of witnessing it. She wasn't there when it happened. She was kind of there when it happened, I guess, or she left at the point, and then him, and his laughter is something out of pain. It's a chronic disorder. And there are people actually out there that deal with this kind of thing. And apparently there's some even more far worse disturbing things. Apparently some women have issues of chronic pain issues of just like chronic. Apparently I heard something weird about like chronic orgasms or something. There's all those kind of weird things out there, of like some things that she can't control, that she's whatever, and which, I mean, it sucks, which personally I think sucks, and it's something, or at least I heard something about that, and I thought that kind of sucked to hear something like that happen, and then there's people, and like I said, chronic laughter, and that's what he's dealing with. It's a painful one. He's not trying to laugh, he's just has that condition, and the times when he tries to show the condition, people think he's just don't understand with that form of his own mental illness, moments like that, and there are some other, and then this sort of metaphorical disturbance thing with the fridge, I guess, at a certain point where he starts to kind of unravel, and then him going on the show, somehow being put on the show because of what had happened, and they decided to print him on the show, and then in turn it just kind of leads to way things go in the end, and just how he chooses to off the Murray guy played by Robert De Niro, and just, or at least how he becomes what he is in his head, and just how they choose to end things and tie things up. You don't know for sure whether, I mean, he believes from what he sees in this paper that is the truth he has to go off of. But you don't see whether or not if the Thomas Wayne there, and then you see also something later where it's with Love Thomas Wayne or something on the back. You don't know if she wrote it or maybe he did, or what's the deal with it, or, I mean, there's so much left up in the air for interpretation of what is and what isn't. Some, they make it very blatantly clear, but for the most part, you're blatantly clear what it seems, but you don't know if this whole entire thing is, because there is a kind of a moment where she mentioned something about him being in an asylum, and all of a sudden it seems he's in the asylum, and you hear him hit his head, and then it goes back. So you don't know if at that point maybe he's kind of imagining this in his head, and that what we see at the end of this movie is part of that too, or what. But for the most part, I'd like to think that what is of the interpretation of the Jokers is what is happening to this guy. That is Arthur Fleck, and him becoming this, and him unraveling and becoming this. And you're getting this, and you still don't know for sure. You kind of do, but you kind of don't. But that's the thing about the Joker. I choose multiple. The quote from Killing Joke of, if I had to choose what, I would choose multiple choice. Has massive interpretations, and I love how they handle this. It does still feel like they do care about the Joker character, and it's the best interpretation outside of Heath Ledger's Joker that we will probably ever see or ever get. And I do think that it is worth seeing in the theater, and I hope y'all get a chance to check it out. And I guess for the most part, that's my thoughts in a nutshell. Whether or not, hell, in my own ramblings, you don't even know. May as well just be almost about the same at this point. But what did you guys think of Joker? If you have seen it, leave a comment below. Let me know. As always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, y'all.